recapping what the New York Giants have done thus far in free agency, plus what's still to be done. Special guest Ed Valentine joins me to talk about it, coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Welcome. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. And speaking of GM and whatnot, joining me on today's podcast is the lovely and talented Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. And we're going to talk about the job done by General Manager Joe Schoen in the first week of free agency, what's been done, what still needs to be done, and just overall impressions. So, Edward, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Patty. I'm not sure I've ever been introduced that way, and you know, look at us here as we record, folks. It's a Sunday afternoon, and look at us spending our Sunday afternoon talking to each other. What great, fantastic social lives we lead, Patty. It's awesome.
Well, speak for yourself. I went out last night with my hubby and my brother and sister-in-law. Had a very nice night out, by the way. Found a really fantastic Italian restaurant. If anybody needs a good Italian restaurant in the Hillsborough area, I posted it on my Instagram account, folks. You've got to check this place out. It was amazing. But that being said, Edward, let's talk about the job General Manager Joe Schoen has done so far. Your overall impressions 1 week into free agency. More guys have come than they've lost. But what are your thoughts overall on the direction he's taken this franchise so far?
Well, in speaking specifically about the last week, first week of free agency, Patty, when I wrote about this at Big Blue View on Friday, I used the word transformative. And that's not necessarily because Joe Schoen went out and spent a ton of money and went hog wild and bought at the top of the market, you know, at every position. But it's because of when you look at what he did. I mean, on the defensive side, signing Bobby Okereke at a position where the Giants absolutely needed help, where they simply weren't good enough a year ago. That's a huge help to the defense. You know, the Nunez Roches signing was also a help to the run defense, which you've listened to Joe talk enough this offseason. That front seven, that run defense is something that he was obviously wanting to upgrade. May still do more with that if A'Shawn Robinson signs on Monday, but you know, we'll see how that goes. But when I talk about transformative, I'm really looking at the receiver group, and I'm actually talking about the draft board, because, you know, people are still the Darren Waller trade. There's no risk in that for the Giants, really. There's really very little risk. I know they restructured his contract, but still, at any point, if they were to move on from him, it's not going to cost them a lot in terms of dead money. There's very little risk there. And I still get questions, and I'm sure you get questions, and I see it on Twitter. Well, what are the Giants going to do now about a number one receiver?
Yeah.
People, wake up. Look at Darren Waller's resume. Darren Waller is now your number one receiver for the New York Giants. He is that guy. Stop saying, well, we need a number one wideout. Darren Waller's your number one guy. Seems to me that the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowls with a tight end as their number one receiver. Seems to me that Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski had a lot of success that way in New England. It doesn't have to be a wideout. The top target, the top guy doesn't have to be a wideout. The Giants added Paris Campbell. They brought back Darius Slayton. They've moved on from Kenny Golladay. That looks like they're moving on from Richie James. So the receiving group that Daniel Jones is throwing to, even if they don't add anything else, and I think they'll add in the draft, the receiving group is different. And you look at what they did on the defensive side of the ball, the draft board is a lot different. And for me, that's what I mean when I talk about transformative. Did it turn the Giants from a 9-win team into a Super Bowl contender? Maybe not yet, but I would say probably not yet. But it changed a lot of things for the New York Giants.
Yes, it did. And very good point about, wide receiver. Joe Shane actually, if you go back and you listen to or reread the transcript from the end of the year, he basically said, number one receivers, there's a lot of guys sitting at home. And it was almost like he was foreshadowing what he was going to do. Like, yes, you would love to have a number one receiver like what the Eagles have. You'd love to have that. But in downplaying it a little bit, you kind of figured that maybe there was another plan that he was thinking of. And that plan, turned out to be Waller. I mean, that just developed for them. So the very good point on that. Now, when you look, though, at what they haven't done yet, offensive line, which I think we can all agree is a big need right now. I think the only center, if I'm not mistaken, that they have on the roster is Ben Bredesen, who also happens to be a guard, not a true center. They haven't really addressed cornerback. Those are two positions I would think that, they're going to want to look at some sooner than later.
Absolutely. But, Patty, I think that what happens through free agency is, as I said, it sort of is transformative for the draft board. And free agency a lot of times tells us what an organization thinks about the draft, where they think the talent might be. And if you look at it, the Giants have Adoree Jackson at cornerback, and then they have, no offense to Aaron Robinson and Cordale Flott and Darnay Holmes and those young guys that they have, but they have Adoree Jackson and a bunch of question marks.
Yeah. And
Adoree Jackson has really one more year left on his deal before the Giants, could possibly move on from him. So, and I know you study those kinds of things and you pay attention to those kinds of things. To me, the way free agency is setting up is screaming to me that the Giants are looking at the draft for a bigger play at cornerback. They might be looking at the draft for a big play at another position we've talked about a lot, the center position. Because you can play Ben Bredesen at guard and be fine. You've got Josh Azudu, who was a third-round pick a year ago, who they still think is a starting caliber NFL guard in the long term. You still have Shane Lemieux, if he can ever get healthy. You have Marcus McKeithen that they drafted a year ago. You have options to play left guard. What you don't have is a long-term center. And I've talked about this on my show, and I've written about it at Big Blue View. The last center the New York Giants had who started for more than 1 year is Weston Richburg. And so we're going all the way back to, what is that, 2016 or 17, I think? I'd have to look at it. I think it was 17 that he, when the last year that Richburg played for the Giants. So the Giants have gone through a different starting center every year for like 5 years now. And you just can't function that way.
Yeah.
You just, I would think that sooner or later, John Feliciano is going to be brought back because your friend and mine, Nick Gates, is now sadly in Washington. So, I would think Feliciano will be back at some point, but I have to think again, he's a short-term answer until they develop a young player they feel like is ready to take over.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I would love to see them get a young center. And, looking back at history, do you remember the last time the Giants drafted a center in the first round and who it was?
In the first round?
Yes, because I wouldn't allow them draft. If John Michael Schmitz is sitting there at 25, I would not rule that out as a possibility. But when was the last time? Do you remember? I know the answer, but I want to see if you know.
Well, I'm assuming that you know the answer because you asked the question, Patty. The thing of it is, I know that Weston Richburg was a second round pick.
Right.
So we're going back. I mean, we're going way back. And I honestly don't know the answer. Are we going back like way
We're
back
going back
here?
to Edward. We're going back to the days when you had a full head of hair.
Oh dear Lord. Oh dear Lord. I would
1989, Brian Williams.
Brian Williams. Oh Lord. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I was just barely out of college. Was I out of college? Yeah, I think no, I was still in college. That's how far back we're going. And I ain't getting any younger either. So, but it's been a long time. I mean, you generally don't see that, but Schmitz is one of the, I mean, you talk about NFL ready centers. That guy, every scouting report I've read, every scout I've spoken to, they all say that that's the dude.
Yeah. And there are other guys beyond Schmitz too, who could end up developing into quality starting centers. The Joe Tipman from Wisconsin is one. I think Luke Whippler from Ohio State is another. So there are guys. Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas is another, mid-round type guy that might be able to develop into a starting center. So if you don't get Schmitz in the first round, if you think that's too rich for a center, and we've seen centers don't go in the top 10, top 12.
Right.
But they do go in the last third of that first round.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we see teams theoretically, according to, draft analysts, top 100 draft boards, we see teams quote unquote reach for centers, but it worked out pretty well for the Dallas Cowboys when they quote unquote reached for Travis Frederick. I can't remember the player's name, but the New England Patriots drafted a center in the first round, I think just last year, that people thought was going to go in the third or fourth round.
Yep.
So teams do it. It is a very, very important position.
It really is. And not to mention, you have a young offensive line, relatively speaking. Wouldn't you want that offensive line to gel together, grow old together? You get Andrew Thomas re-signed, maybe not this year, but next year. You've got Evan Neal on his rookie deal. Then you put a center in there who's on his rookie deal. You have maybe a new left guard. If Bredesen isn't in your long-term answer, maybe one of these young guys on a rookie deal. And then you really just need to address right guard if you're not going to, keep Glowinski. So it's an opportunity for the offensive line, I think, to just grow old together, so to speak.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, Patty, and we've talked about this before, you go back to that O'Hara, Snee, Soybert, McKenzie deal offensive line. And that offensive line was tremendous, but that offensive line got old.
Yes.
And there weren't replacements ready for those guys.
Yep.
And the Giants have been fixing that ever since they didn't have people ready to step in. And more than a decade later, they're still chasing the fix. So,
and it's still a problem too.
So if they think, Schmitz is a guy who's worthy of the pick at 25, I have absolutely no problem with that at all.
Yeah, I don't either. Definitely.
Although I would say, listen, I'm a Maryland grad. And,
yes.
And it would warm my heart to see Deonte Banks be the pick for the Giants at 25, the cornerback out of Maryland. That would warm my heart.
Maybe they get him in the second round, because I do think, the cornerback class is so deep. I think they could probably get a good quality cornerback in the second round. So, I mean, if I were doing a mock draft today, and eventually I have to do a mock draft because I haven't done one in a while, but I would probably go offensive line and corner as my first two picks. I don't know that I would go wide receiver in the first two picks.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Patty. I see that people talk about Osiris Torrance, who's the guard from Florida, and he's generally thought of as a late first round guy, sometimes mocked to the Giants. That one doesn't thrill me.
Nah, me either.
For the simple reason that if you're going to use a draft resource in those first 57 picks, if you're Joe Schoen, I want that player to be a center.
Hey, Giant fans, Giants general manager Joe Schoen has had some tough decisions to make as he rebuilds the roster, making it into a dynasty. And speaking of building a dynasty, if you think you have what it takes to give NFL GMs a run for their money, then you got to try Ultimate Football GM. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control every strategic aspect of your team as you play through the season and lead your team to glory trying to build a historic dynasty. Believe me, folks, I've started playing this game recently, and it is so addictive. You can manage every little aspect from uniforms to marketing to salary cap to the draft, the trade, lineups, coaches, you name it, you can manage it. And this game is so much fun that you can play it offline and compete with your friends for bragging rights. The only thing more real than this game is actually sitting in an NFL GM's chair. That's how much control you have over your franchise. And did I mention that Ultimate Football GM is completely free to play and that Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On, that's in all caps, by the way, when they register for a new account. So what are you waiting for? Find the Ultimate Football GM in the app stores or visit ultimate-gm.com. And don't forget that promo code. Again, that's in all caps and it's Locked On to get your free boost to build your dynasty. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Hey, Giant fans, in case you didn't know, I'm on Instagram. You can follow me at Patty Traina, Traina. I have audio clips, I have interviews, I have factoids, and I will soon have video from Giants OTAs and various other things, press conferences and whatnot. So make sure you're following me on Instagram, and also make sure you're following the sister account, which is Locked On Giants. All right, Edward, let's talk about defense. Now, again, going back to what Joe Schoen said after the season in his postseason presser at the combine, he basically told everybody, we got to upgrade the run defense, which was a big problem. I think the Giants finished 27th in run defense last year. We saw what happened when Leonard Williams couldn't play or when Dexter Lawrence had to come off the field to take a blow. Matter of fact, we saw with Dexter Lawrence, who's only 25 years old, towards the end of the season, because he was playing so much, the guy needed a rest. At 25,
the guy was taking, the guy was being given veteran days off during practice as a 24 or 25-year-old still on his rookie contract, which just tells you how much he played last year and how much he needed, to back off.
Yep. So that said, they added Nacho Nunez. Nunez Roches, love that pick, by the way. They added Bobby Okereke.
I always get that one wrong too, Patty. I can't say it right either, and I'm still.
I had a pause there. I had our Locked On Colts co-host on, and he said, "Just remember, carrot cake," and he says you'll never get the name wrong. So I don't know if Bobby will appreciate that, but I had to stop.
As long as you don't call him carrot cake.
No, I don't think I would do that. I don't know him well enough to do that. But he does seem like a nice guy, by the way. He might get a chuckle out of that. But anyway, so they added a couple guys there. They're looking at, Ashawn Robinson. They have Ryder Anderson still, Tamon Fox is still there. You look at that front seven. To me, they're building up that defensive line, which, Shane basically said they were going to do. But to me, a sneaky need this team still has is at the edge, because you've got Thibodeau and you've got Ojulari, who hopefully will stay healthy. Zimenez right now is unsigned. They brought back Hottie Ward, which, was a sneaky good move. But do you agree that edge rusher is still kind of a need for this team?
I think you're right that it's a sneaky need. The question is, when you look at the composition of the rest of the roster, I don't think you can use a 25th pick on an edge rusher. I don't think you can. I think that round 3, round 4, I think you have to supplement that, or you have to look in the second wave of free agency and see if there's a veteran guy out there with some upside that, a guy that you can get on one of those 1-year deals, low cost 1-year deal, somebody to supplement that. Because right now, we all love Hottie because of just the kind of person he is. And you absolutely know when he's around, usually because his boombox is around.
Yeah.
And if his boombox isn't around, his booming voice is always around. But Jihad Ward is not a tremendous player. He's a journeyman player with a lot of the reason why you love having him around is for the leadership and the locker room and all of those kinds of things. But other than that, what do you have? You have Tomon Fox. So you need more there.
Yeah.
You need more there. I'm just not sure when we say you need more that you need to go out and do that in the first round.
Yeah. I don't think edge rusher is going to be the pick in the first round. Again, you look at the depth in the draft. Center is not ultra deep, but I think to me that's more of the pressing need. And cornerback, I think they can get a good player, like I said, in the second round. Receiver, if they're going to dip into that pool at this point, your top receivers, you can say Hodgins is going to be one, Slayton's going to be another. And then, if Wan'Dale Robinson is healthy to start the season, he's probably your number 3. And then Jeff Smith, who they signed, is probably your number 4. And then don't forget Colin Johnson, who's coming back off of an injury, who was looking good before that injury. As a matter of fact, he's going to probably be in the mix. So receiver, not that big of a need as I see it. And I know a lot of people ask me, well, what about Odell? And I'm like, guys, I think that ship has sailed. I mean, do you agree?
Absolutely. That ship sailed, Patty. When the Giants signed Paris Campbell, I never thought that, I have never really thought that Odell Beckham to the Giants was going to happen.
Yeah.
The Giants are building, they're still building for the future. They are not a team who's looking at 2023, for example, as all in to win a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
We have to win the Super Bowl in 2023 or the season's a failure. If you're looking at 2023 that way, then maybe you sign Odell Beckham and you give him his $5 million or whatever. If $4 million won't make him happy, you give him 4.1 million and make him happy. I don't know, whatever. but they want players who have futures, Patty. They want players who have upside. That's what Paris Campbell is. He's
right.
A 1-year gamble on a player who still has a lot of upside, who's really, I think we only saw the beginnings last year of what Paris Campbell can do as an NFL player if he can stay healthy. Those are the kinds of players that the Giants want, not guys who are going to be, who are going to help them for a year. Not guys who are, help us get over the hump to win a Super Bowl this year. They want guys they can build with and go forward with. I've never thought the Odell Beckham stuff was real when it came to the Giants. I said this to somebody about a week or so ago. I thought the Giants have played the Odell Beckham thing really well, to be honest with you, because they have kept his name out there in connection with them. They have done all the right things. They brought him in for a visit last year during the season. They went to his workout. Joe Shane has said, we've talked to him, all of those kinds of things. What the Giants can say at the end of it when Odell Beckham goes somewhere else was, well, we monitored it. We tried, we looked into it. It just didn't work out. He chose to go somewhere else.
Right.
So they can say, we did what we could, or we did what we tried here.
And they did their due diligence, which you would expect them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave any stone unturned. And again, Shane said that they were going to look everywhere for receiver help. So, so far, everything Shane has said, he has delivered and done.
And I wouldn't, right, Patty, and I wouldn't be 100% shocked if they drafted a wide receiver at
Neither
25.
would I. Yeah.
But that depends. Again, that depends on their draft board. And that
Right.
depends. I mean, I love Zay Flowers from Boston College, but he's
Right.
probably the 5th or 6th wide receiver, on most people's draft boards. But let's say, Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, who some people think is the best wide receiver in the draft. Some people have him rated a little bit lower. Let's say the Giants love him and he falls to 25.
Mm-hmm.
Then you might not have planned to take a wide receiver, but why do you pass up the value?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So decisions to be made, but I think we probably can agree that maybe receiver won't be as pressing. I mean, if it comes down to, a cluster of guys who have the same grade and where need now takes, precedent, you're probably going to think, like I said, either cornerback or center if you have a cluster of guys that have the same grade. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be in roster rebuild mode right now, but the NBA season is in full swing and other sports leagues are getting ready to start up, such as MLB, the WNBA, and so forth. So now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, NFL, and more. Hey, Giant fans, thanks for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen or watch every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more, join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ed, let's talk a little bit about Julian Love. He departed, not a surprise as far as I'm concerned. A surprise also that was the return of Darius Slayton. But I want to talk about Julian Love because a lot of people ask me, what are they going to do now at safety? And I keep telling people that they have Jason Pinnock. They drafted Dane Belton. They have Trenton Thompson from last year. And I think they're going to add a safety. Joe Shane, again, at the combine said, look, we're anticipating there are going to be veteran safeties available. So we'll look there. So that was kind of like, the handwriting was on the wall. Are you comfortable with where the safety position is right now for this team? And of course I haven't mentioned Xavier McKinney, who's obviously a lock, but he's got to keep working on that hand.
Yeah, for right now I am, Patty. And listen, I get the fact that people are upset. Julian Love was a draft pick. He's a guy that Giants fans became familiar with. He played well last year. All of those things. He's a good guy. He's a good teammate. He's a good leader. He did a lot. Played a lot of positions over the course of his time with the Giants. I get all of that. But people, since the day the season ended, Joe Shane telegraphed this move. He telegraphed the fact that he was not going to go out into the market and compete for Julian Love. He just wasn't going to do it. And I don't know what sort of contract the Giants offered Love. I don't know if he took less money to go to Seattle. I really don't. But Joe telegraphed the fact from the very beginning that he thought the Giants would be fine if Julian Love went somewhere else.
Yep.
And when someone like Pat Leonard tweets that he thought there was a, quote, persistent disconnect between Love and the Giants, to me, that's exactly what he's talking about. It's been very apparent from what Julian Love has said about the way he played and things like that. It's been very apparent that Julian Love saw his value and his ability one way. And the Giants saw him another way. They saw him as a replaceable piece.
Yeah.
And that's why Julian Love is in Seattle.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think they'll add that they'll, whether it be a veteran or a undrafted free agent, I think they'll add to the spot. I mean, we've got 90 roster spots that you can fill. I have to believe that they will add another guy.
Absolutely.
Were you surprised that Darius Slayton returned? I mean, that was one I'll admit. I thought he wasn't going to be back. I'm glad he's back. I think I'm glad to see he was rewarded for all he did, but I was surprised that he came back. He apparently, or reportedly, he had a better offer on the table from Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't know what the offer was that Slayton had from Atlanta, but I was surprised that the Giants brought Slayton back as well. I mean, let's look at this and let's be real. You brought in, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll came in, and it was really obvious from day one all the way throughout training camp. It was obvious that Darius Slayton was not a guy who thrilled them. That was apparent. Darius Slayton ran with the third group all through training camp. I contend that Darius Slayton made the New York Giants roster last year only because Colin Johnson got hurt.
Yeah.
Darius Slayton was the seventh guy on a 7-man, receiver depth chart.
Yeah.
He finally got to play, when Kenny Golladay got hurt and Kadarius Toney got hurt for the umpteenth time. And David Sills wasn't getting anything done. And he finally got to play when there was really no other choice. And he had taken a pay cut to begin with.
Right.
I really expected Darius Slayton to go out into the market this offseason and say, this is my one chance to go out and get a payday. And I really didn't expect that payday, a contract that could get him, I think, $16.5 million. I didn't expect that to come from the Giants. I really didn't. But as you said, I'm glad it did for the simple reason that he earned it.
Yeah, he did.
On the field, off the field, he earned it. And I think that's something that will play extremely well in the locker room.
Sure.
Because he's a popular guy. And I think that when you talk about building a culture and building trust between players in the front office, they rewarded this player for what he did on the field. And I think that goes a long way in the locker room.
Sure it does. And that's a very underrated aspect of it, I think, at any rate. And a final question for you. I want to talk big picture here with what Joe Shane's been doing. You look at the contract Daniel Jones got. It's a 4-year deal, but they can get out of it after 2. They have a 1-year flyer on Paris Campbell. I think Bobby Okereke's deal, they can get out, if I'm not mistaken, after 2 years. So a lot of deals are not long-term, choke the cap type of deals. Do you like the approach he's taking, or does that just concern you because, oh my God, if this doesn't work out, now we're going to turn the roster over again and not have that continuity?
No, I like it, Patty, because you're not like in Paris Campbell, for example, he had 3 years of serious injuries and had a really good year last year, but you're not overpaying Paris Campbell. You're not tying yourself to Paris Campbell for 4 years to where you'll have all kinds of dead money if it doesn't work out. Darius Slayton's deal is for 2 years. Giants could probably get out of that after a year if they really wanted to. I don't have the cap hits and the dead money in front of me for the second year, but once in a while you have to make that big splash. You have to make that big commitment, but you get yourself in trouble when you kick the can down the road and you pass all this money into the future and you tie yourselves to guys for too long. So I love this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, and some other things that they've done differently. And last year, I remember doing an article about, the contract structures, just how they're structuring some of these contracts with higher workout bonuses. And, the way they're setting it up, they're not going to get choked down the line, even though the cap's going to go up. They're not going to be, scrambling for space down the line, if these deals don't work out.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing that I have said to people about Daniel Jones' contract. When you look at Jones' contract and you look at the cap hits, yes, the cap hits go up dramatically. But if the cap itself goes up the way it's projected to go up,
Mhm.
the rise in the salary cap is going to more than cover the rise in those contracts.
Exactly.
So, because I think the cap is projected to go up $36 million next year. That's less than Daniel Jones' cap hit goes up, and it's projected to go up another 30 or so million the following year. So again, the rising cap more than covers the rising cap hits for the quarterback. So that when I look at it, that was a really good deal that Joe Shane, was able to finally get. Yeah, it had a 4 in front of it, which sort of shocked a lot of people, but it's not a
true 4 though.
It's not a true 4, and it's also the going rate for quarterbacks these days. It just for good quality quarterbacks these days, that's what it is.
Yeah. And plus it sends a good message, like, you were talking about before, with messages to the locker room and, being fair and everything like that, because that is so important. And it's an underrated aspect of building a roster because, now you got guys that want to come here as opposed to maybe a couple of years ago or whatever. Maybe guys were a little reluctant because, of stuff that went on and whatnot. But overall, Ed, Joe Shane doing a good job in your opinion so far?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, easy enough, right?
Yes, ma'am. Works for me.
Yep.
You see, and I snuck the ma'am in there, and I thought you might yell at me, but but I got away with it.
Well, I mean, when you're respectful, I'm not going to yell at you.
There you go.
All right, Eddie B. Appreciate you coming on, folks. You can check him out. Big Blue View. He also has Big Blue View Radio. Matter of fact, I'm going to be on his show if you want to hear what I have to say. And he's going to probably abuse me the way I abused him. That's just what we do. Just what we do.
We'll just turn most of these questions around, and Patty will give you her opinion instead of me giving everybody my opinion. So
yeah, and like I said, there'll be a little back and forth, but it's part of the show. So anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you keep it here all week. Going to have more guests for you. Lot more content. We'll keep doing the shorts over on the YouTube channels with any breaking news and whatnot. Check out the Instagram account, like I spoke about, at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA, for video clips and all kinds of cool stuff. For Ed Valentine, I'm Patricia Traina of Giant Fans. We will see you tomorrow.